Hey up and welcome to another episode of Last Cast. Today you join us back up here at Hilltop Reservoir just outside Slowett, and we're up here today to do a bit of feeder fishing. We're actually going to film two videos today, one that we'll put on a bit later on, which we're going to cover waggler fishing, but the first thing we're going to do today is cover maggot feeder fishing. We'll put a link on screen now for you, which will send you to the second channel, Bobble TV2, where we've actually showed how to tie this rig when we fished it up at monkton pools. But the rig itself is quite sort of unique to this style of fishing, so it's basically an evolution on your average maggot feeder fishing. Somewhere like this, obviously the reservoir's quite deep, full of roach, and you want to be basically drawing fish into your peg by having bait falling through. They're not going to be shoaled up in one area, so you're going to be looking to attract fish. The best way to do that, as we all know, is getting bait falling through the water and getting some sort of cloud in the water as well. So the rig that I'm going to use today actually sort of, it helps me do that basically. In terms of the equipment that we've got a 3000 size Daiwa TDM, nice little workhorse of a reel, nice and light, and couples nicely with the 10-foot Sigma wand bomb rod that you'll see me use for a lot of my river fishing, sort of link ledger fishing, stuff like that. Really nice soft action. We've got the softest quiver tip in it to start with. Again, as the session goes on, I might increase the strength of the quiver tip, just depending on whether, say, the wind picks up or I'm struggling to hit bites. But basically, the crux of what we're using today will be the rig, so we'll cover that now. In terms of what we've got 4-pound Daiwa TDR mainline, so nice and thin, cuts through the air nicely, really good for casting, but equally there's a bit of strength there, but there's not much stretch, so again it's good for bite registration. Something like this I want to be fishing mono because it'll cut through the water quicker as the feeder sinks, so I'll be in more contact with it than I would be with braid. Braid's obviously better when the feeder's settled, but for this kind of fishing, a nice thin high-tech mono is what we're looking for. The rig down here, as you can see, might look a bit complicated, but I'll explain it sort of component by component to give you an idea of why I've made the changes to it that I have from your standard maggot feeder rig. Obviously, basically the crux of a maggot feeder rig, you've got a ledger system, and then you've got a nice long hook length with a small hook, but there's quite a few changes in here. First of all, above the feeder, I've got a little float stop there, as you can see. What that does is basically it gives me an option to create a bolt effect. When we fished it at monkton, you've got to fish, or commercial, you've got to fish free running rigs, whereas on places like this, when roach bites can be really hard to hit, having a float stop above the feeder can help you in pretty much every single circumstance. If the fish are being quite finicky and you want to let the bites develop, say skimmers are coming into the peg, move that stop out the way. If there's a lot of roach there and you're missing a lot of bites, say the tip's rattling around as soon as the feeder settles and you're missing them, bring that stop down, and that creates a bolt rig there, so the fish will hook itself against the feeder. So we'll hopefully show you that a bit later on. The next component there is a nice long feeder link. This one's by Preston Innovations. There's a couple of reasons why I use these. First of all, it effectively gives me a longer hook length without having the hook length that long, if it sort of makes sense. When the feeder's falling, what we're looking to do is get the hook trailing behind the feeder and get the fish following that hook bait down and taking it. What I don't want to have is a really long hook length, because that's going to compromise bite indication. So by having a longer link, the hook's further from the feeder, yet it's actually, the hook length is probably, well, I can get away with it being 6 inches shorter than if I just had a standard feeder link on there. It's a bit difficult to explain, but in my head it kind of makes sense. That then comes down to 2 stots and then a little double barrel swivel. What we're looking for today, ideally, if things go to plan, is a lot of bites, especially from these roach. And the thing is, obviously, once you've had a bite, say you miss a bite, quite often they'll bust the maggot, especially on these natural venues. They do feed quite aggressively, so a little swivel there means that the hook length isn't going to spin up. Because it might be, if there's a lot of fish in the peg, that we're in and out twice a minute at times. You never really know, because if there's a lot of fish there, you get a lot of bites. So a swivel there just to stop the hook length spinning up. Then we've got the usual twizzle boom here, but against that I've got a nice long sleeve there. Again, that just helps with the anti-tangle, especially with the swivel. If the knot was just there, then effectively the link would just hang down like that, but that little sleeve there just kicks it away. The little twizzle boom there is actually on a length probably about 3 foot long of 018 fluorocarbon. So the usual kind of reasons for the twizzle boom helps kick it away from the feeder there, so we're not going to get tangles on the cast. But the actual length of fluorocarbon is there, so I don't have to use a really long length of light hook length. Basically it's there for 2 reasons. Firstly, it's thicker, so it'll fall through the water a lot slower. Again, what we're trying to do, get that hook bait trailing behind the feeder as it falls. And secondly, it's really nice and stiff, so that helps with bite registration. If I've got a very long sort of 08, 010 hook length of normal mono, that's going to be very supple. And what that's going to create is basically missed bites, where the fish is going to be able to move too far with the bait. It's going to have a chance to feel the weight of the rig before I actually see the bite. So nice long length of 018 fluorocarbon there. What it does allow me to do though is then attach a nice short supple hook length. this way I can use pretty much all my pole rig hook lengths. I've got a massive range there to choose from. And another note as well is I attach it loop to loop. Again, what that does is creates a bit more resistance in the water, effectively holding that hook bait up for a little longer. The hook length itself, there's 0.093 Drennan Suplex, standard mono, not the fluorocarbon. Again, because I've already got the stiffness from this, effectively a leader or second part of the hook length, whatever you want to refer to it as. It just allows me to have a much more supple hook length there for the bait to act more naturally. So that's the reason for that choice. And then that just comes down to a size 20 Kamazan B560 that we'll start with. Pretty much my go-to roach fishing hook, or pretty much any natural venue. Nice light pattern, beak point, so I can use single, double maggot nice and effectively. May even use dead maggot if I have to. But like I say, dead simple really. Once you learn how to tie it, it's not too difficult, but each component there is not there to look pretty, it's there to do a job. And hopefully when we put it into practice today, that's what it'll be able to do. Ideally, what we're looking to achieve with this rig, as I've said a couple of times, is that bait falling through the water. So what I'm really hoping to do is hook fish firstly in the bottom lip, because that'll tell me that they followed the bait down, picked up and then come back up in the water. That'll tell me if the rig's basically fishing right. And equally, we're looking to get bites as soon as that feeder hits bottom, if not while it's falling. Quick word on the feeder then, because I've not touched on that yet. Just pop this in the hook keep ring. The feeders that I'm using today, these are Drennan feeder bombs. I think you can still probably get them, and I've made a couple of modifications to it. Again, as I was saying, little changes to the rigs. Other feeders that I'd use for this similar kind of style are these Drennan ones, same kind of thing. What you want though is a bottom loaded feeder. You've got sort of your Kamazan black caps and things like that, and those will fall flat through the water. What I'm looking to do is have this falling directly down, and with the holes on top there, what I've done, if I can get that to show there, is I've actually modified this feeder slightly. It's a 16 gram small size, so getting enough bait in but not tons. But I've actually bored the holes out there, as you can see with the screwdriver, only the ones around the top part of the feeder. As I say, it'll fall directly down through the water. It's nice and aerodynamic for casting as well. What I'm hoping to do is when the water comes through the bottom of the feeder, it'll push the maggots out the top and create a nice little tunnel of bait, and behind it should be my hook bait falling through them, and that's where we're looking to try and get bites. So dead simple, all you do is get sort of a crosshead screwdriver, bore those holes out, and that'll basically get the maggots to come out the feeder quicker. So that's the rig and the tackle looked at. As I say, it looks a bit complicated, but there's a few different things in there. So we'll have a quick look at the bait now before we start fishing. So as I say, that's the rig and all the tackle that we've looked at. Quick word on bait now. As I say, it's a maggot feeder, usually self-explanatory, but again, there's a couple of little tweaks you can make to it. What I've done there, I've got 3 pints of maggots, reds with a few whites in there. I've also got a few casts and a bit of hemp as well, but that'll be mainly used for the float fishing that we'll do later on in that second video. But again, little things that I can add to the feeder. But what I've done with the maggots there, they're as fresh as possibly can be, so nice and light bait wise. But I've also put in quite a bit of Census 3000 River there, which is a nice heavy mix, but I've put that in dry, and what that's there to do is create a cloud in the water. If I was using a finer mix, it's more of an attractant, whereas this has got quite large food particles, so hopefully the fish will also feed on it, but there's plenty of scent from it and it will follow the maggots down nicely. So again, just little additions to your fishing that can make little improvements, and again, trying to make the maggot feeder just that bit better, a bit more effective. Like I say, we'll try and put that into practice now. Right, so as I say, we've run through all the tackle and what we're going to do today. Hopefully we can put it into practice now, so we'll go for the first cast of the session. First things first with maggot feeder fishing, you need to get that hook bait on before you actually fill the feeder. Again, not so important when you're ground bait feeder fishing, but with maggots, obviously they're going to start crawling out the feeder before you've made your cast. And equally, you don't want to be faffing around with the feeder when you've filled it. You want to fill it as quickly as you can and get it chucked out there. Quick word on what I'm doing again, filling the feeder, just trying to cram as many little tips into this as possible. As you can see, I'm only filling it pretty much 3/4 full. Again, the more space you give the maggots, the quicker they're going to come out of the feeder. Again, later on I might pack that feeder a bit tighter or go back to a traditional, non-modified feeder. But we'll go for the first cast. As you can see there, immediately when that feeder's gone in, I'm watching the quiver tip underwater. Luckily it's quite clear. I'm trying to sink that line as quick as I can. Nice flick of the rod, similar to waggler fishing, and I'm watching that tip as the feeder's actually falling. If you can see the tip on the screen, it'd make a bit more sense. But basically I'm keeping a really tight tip and watching it as the feeder falls before it springs back when the feeder hits bottom. I'm looking then for pulls. A bit later on in the session, when we've got a bit more bait in the peg, hopefully that's when we'll be getting bites, is the fish will be hooking themselves against the weight of not only the quiver tip but also the feeder falling. There's a bite straight away. Not sure whether we've got the first fish of the session on, but that was an indication immediately. As you can see there, that was probably before that feeder had reached bottom. So that's a good little sign straight off the bat. Yeah, the maggot's absolutely bust, so there's definitely a few fish there. Again, if I start missing a lot of bites, what I'll actually do is shorten this length of fluorocarbon down to, again, try and get the fish to hook themselves against the feeder. That was a bite straight away. Again, by picking to fish in that sort of ravine, I know that there will be 1 or 2 fish there. So hopefully we'll get off to a quick start. Again, filling the feeder. What I'm doing is also laying the hook length across my lap just to make sure it doesn't snag in any of the seat box bits and bats before I make the cast. Nice punch with the feeder, hit the clip, and again, rod tip goes straight under the water, get a quick couple of turns on the reel, and flick the line to sink it. I'm looking to get that line sunk before the feeder actually hits bottom. So you can see there the tip's round, the feeder's just hit the bottom now. And hopefully as the session goes on at this point is when we'll start getting bites. Again, need to draw a few fish into the peg early. But hopefully it won't be long before we start hooking 1 or 2 of them. Again, what I want to do is try and get the fish used to that feeder going in. Again, because it's quite a light feeder, only 16 grams, it's not going to spook the fish that much, especially in that depth of water. So I want them to do is be sort of drawn in by the noise a little bit. What I'll also do as soon as the feeder's settled is just draw it back again, straighten that hook length out behind the feeder. As I say, the little things, little tweaks that we'll make as the session goes on, because we'll probably fish it for 3 or 4 hours today, is I'll hopefully look to firstly shorten that length of fluorocarbon down to hit more bites. And secondly, if I'm getting plagued by lots of bites, which I would expect in summer where the fish might come really high in the water, then what I'll actually do is go back to a non-modified feeder, so effectively trying to get the maggots to release nearer the bottom than what they will do with this. As I say, making these little modifications to the feeder, putting some ground bait through it, hopefully will mean that we draw fish into the peg quicker. Like I say, we had a bite on the first cast, so again, usual kind of things with feeder fishing apply. Keep twitching the feeder. Again, with this, especially this kind of rig, you wanted to keep that hook bait nice and active. That was a little indication there straight away. But the other thing is, because it is feeder fishing, I will be timing the casts, and I'm going to start quite strict on 4-minute casts. I want that regularity of feed going in. Again, because of the size of feeder, it's feeding on a little and often principle. So again, I'm not going to overfeed the fish straight away. I'm not looking to try and build a better feed initially. I'm looking to try and sort of wean the fish onto the maggots, draw fish in quite quickly, and just try and get bites as quickly as I can, really. But like I say, we'll start off with 4-minute casts, but ideally if the fish do turn up, we shouldn't really have to time the casts. Be looking for indications straight away. Right, so we've just hooked the first fish of the session there. Really sharp little bite there. I've had a couple of little line bites, which interestingly might mean there's 1 or 2 skimmers there. The tiniest little indications. That's why I've started off on this lightest quiver tip, and that's a tiny roach by this venue standards. But at least we've got the first fish. Really aggressive little bite, and again, that's when the hook bait's fully settled. But you might be able to see that fish is hooked right in the bottom lip. So that again tells me that the fish have gone down there, followed the bait, come back up in the water, and that's where we've hooked him. But the fish there has probably moved the tip there probably about 2 or 3 inches, and I think that's just brought him up to the little stop there and might have just hooked him. Again, I'm just going to bring that down a little bit, because if the roach are being finicky today, I do want to try and connect with a few more bites. But at least we're off the mark there. But like I say, because I've started on that lightest quiver tip, I've always got the option to step up to a heavy one if I'm missing bites. But what it has told me is there was 1 or 2 better fish down there, because I have had tiny little indications. Again, whether you'll be able to see those on camera or not, I'm not sure, because they were probably moving the tip by maybe only a mil or 2. But little things like that early in the session tell you that you're in the right place, at least if you're getting indications and liners, there's fish in your peg. So then it's just a case of weaning them onto the bait and then trying to catch them. So at least that's a fish on the second chuck of the day, so we'll crack on. Hopefully we'll build the peg as the day goes on. At least we know there's 1 or 2 fish down there now. So like I say, we'll keep you updated when we do start getting into a good rhythm. Exactly the same process though of casting out, sinking the rod well down, getting as much line under the surface before the feeders hit bottom as possible. And then just tighten up to it really gradually. Again, what I do like to do when I'm tightening up to a feeder, especially when I'm expecting bites on the drop, is try and tighten it as smoothly and as sort of regularly as possible, if that makes any sense. So I know that if I'm just very slightly moving the handle nice and steady, I'm not doing anything sudden that's going to make the tip jerk. If the tip suddenly does move, then it tells me that the fish has taken the bait and that it's time to strike. So again, little things like that. Hopefully we'll be able to put them into practice as the day goes on, and like I say, hopefully we'll build the peg. That's another fish on now. Much steadier pull round that time. But we're into fish straight away, which is really good. Bit bigger than the last one, this. Another nice little roach. So that was pretty much right on cue, that. Hopefully we'll start getting into a few bigger size fish than that, but that's sort of like the average stamp that we're after today. Lovely wild roach from this reservoir, fantastic fish to catch. Like I say, he's had the bait just as it's been falling there. Bite straight away. So again, with a style of fishing like this, if you can get into a good rhythm of casting, loading the feeder and being really quick with it, as you see there, that's 2 fish in a couple of minutes. And that's what we're looking to do today. Again, as you get better at this style of fishing, you'll be able to fill the feeder a bit more quickly, a bit more efficiently, and get it out there a bit faster. And it's almost like a sort of speed fishing approach to fishing the feeder. Again, what I'm looking to is get the feeder out nice and quick, get bites as fast as I can, bring the fish in, as I say, try and build a weight doing that. We're not after sort of skimmers or bream today, we're after whatever we can catch, and especially these little roach. You can build a decent weight quite quickly with them. That brings me on to another little tip as well regarding the rod rests. I'm using quite a long rod rest today. You can use sort of the long flat ones and they'd be ideal in this kind of situation. What you want is a nice big rod rest so you can get the feeder out there, sink the line and get the rod on the rest nice and quick, ready to register bites nice and fast. Again, it goes along with what I'm saying today. We're not looking to wait for bites, so again, that's why I've got the rod on my knee and a nice wide feeder rest. Again, little things like that just speed up the process of catching these fish. Right, so we've just hooked another fish now on the bottom. And interestingly, it looks like the fish tend to be, the bites tend to be more prominent nearer the deck at the moment. Quite steady pull rounds as well, so I think the fish are still sort of in a bit of winter mode really. Again, another nice little roach. But what I'm thinking of doing now is actually shortening that hook length down, probably by about 6 inches, just to see if that increases the sort of like the severity of the bites. At the moment you're getting little pulls, it looks like the fish are just picking up the bait and just about register on the tip. So I think what I'll do is just trim that down a little bit. It's a dead simple process, just tying another loop, cutting this one off and attaching the hook length down there. Again, little changes like that. What I'm also debating whether it's worth doing, because it might turn out the fishing's going to be a bit difficult today, is I might do some floating maggots, but again, I'll cover those if I decide to make them or employ them. So I'll just have a quicker adjustment of the hook length now, bring that down by I think 6 or 10 inches, something like that, just see if that makes a difference. So I'll crack on with that now, and hopefully we'll get a few more fish because of it. Right, so I've just shortened that length of fluorocarbon there just slightly. One thing that I forgot to mention as well before I did it is I've had a couple more liners as well, which tells me that there might be 1 or 2 skimmers in the peg, and again, they tend to move closer to the feeder on these natural venues, so a shorter hook length, especially on a maggot feeder like this, could reward us with a couple more skimmers. It seems that the bulk of the roach are near the deck anyway at the moment, so that's where I'm sort of concentrating my attack. But like I say, by having that bait falling through the water and that kind of rig, it is drawing fish a lot more than a standard feeder approach. Again, another couple of little things to note as well. When I've been casting, it's one of those things that you'll learn eventually when you are fishing a venue like this. It's different every time you come, obviously, with the flat, calm water, sort of the thickness of the line, but it's how many turns of the reel I need to use to sink the line before I flick the rod up. Again, I'm using sort of a similar principle to like when you're waggler fishing to do that. Casting out, taking a few turns on the reel, and then chopping the rod up to sink the line. Like I say, doing that means that I don't have that arc in the line basically from my rod tip down to the feeder, which ultimately will result in missed bites. And again, because it's a maggot feeder as well, I'm not looking like with ground bait. I want the feed to go straight down to the bottom and then release its contents. With the maggot feeder, I'm looking to create a nice big spread of bait. There's another slow pull round there, and this could be another roach on. I'm looking to create that nice spread of bait to draw fish into the peg. So I'm not too worried about concentrating them in one area. If anything, I want them, I want them grubbing around more for the bait than I would want them, say, if I was ground bait feeder fishing. There we go, another nice little roach. Slightly bigger stamp, that one. Like we say, we're already starting to get into a few fish. But again, by having a maggot feeder that sort of creates a spread of bait, what that also means is you will inherently then get more aggressive bites, especially if the fish are looking to pick up 1, 2, maybe 3 maggots out of each feeder that goes in. They're going to have to grub around for them, so they're going to have to move from each bait to each bait, because obviously the particles in your feeder are the same as what you're using on the hook. So they'll have to move a bit further to pick up another bait, which obviously means that if they pick up your hook bait, you're going to get a much more positive registration on the tip. So again, little things like that to think about. Clearly today the fish aren't moving around a lot at the moment, so that's again why I'm starting on the lightest quiver tip. I'm able to pick up those bites nice and quick. But as I say, hopefully through regular casting, getting into a good rhythm. As I say, I've already, after only about 10 casts, scrapped my timing of 4 minutes. Effectively, I'm getting with indications within that time frame. So I don't need to time the cast. So hopefully as we start to introduce more bait into the peg, start to get them fish shoaling up, get more bites, and again make a few little tweaks and changes that hopefully, if we're lucky, we might be able to sort out the odd skimmer, the odd perch, something like that. And that's the other good thing, obviously, with maggot feeder fishing, is it's not a very selective method. You will catch pretty much everything in your peg. And as we're sort of showing today, you can make it as simple or, in this case, as complicated as you like. But hopefully, obviously, the things that we're running through today, little tips and tricks with regards to the rigs, how we're getting the feed to go into the peg, little additions in terms of like modifying your feeders, things like that. Just get you thinking a little bit more about your maggot feeder fishing. Although it is a very simple method, you can do little things to it just to try and increase the amount of bites that you're getting. Another fish on now. As I say, we're very early in the session really, and we're getting a bite to chuck. Another nice little roach. Again, not big fish at the moment, but you can see catching one of these a chuck, how quickly you'll be able to build a weight. And again, he's nailed right in the bottom lip. That's exactly what we're after. Again, only an ounce or two a piece, but like I say, on a difficult day, this is what you're after, getting bites pretty much every chuck, just trying to catch whatever's in front of you. And it makes a nice change for me, obviously, coming down here as well. Don't have to mix up tons of ground bait and lug all that kind of gear down here. So it's nice to just keep it simple, make a few little tweaks to the rig. As I say, it's good when it does pay off, so we'll crack on now, keep that bait going in. As I say, hopefully we'll start to get into a few better fish and start really building a decent little weight in the keep net. Right, so a couple of hours into our session, so I'll just give you a quick update as to how things are going. Long story short, it's effectively a bite to chuck. The fishing's been really good. After the first sort of half hour, 40 minutes, keeping that feeder going in quite regularly. Seems that plenty of roach have turned up in the peg, and as I say, we're getting bites pretty much as soon as I'm setting the feeder, really. Just load this one up and chuck it back out there. I'll give you a quick little update as to what I've been doing. Basically, a couple of changes to the rig. One thing that you'll notice as well is I've removed the sleeve off there that was kicking the hook length out away from the feeder. I've done that purely because I've shortened that link down, probably now to about 14 inches, something like that. Another little change I've made is the hook length. As I was saying at the beginning of the session, that I've got a few hook lengths tied up, and I'll be looking to step up in hook size as the session goes on. Again, always start on the small side just to try and get bites, and then step it up as the session goes on. Because we're getting that many bites now, I've started missing one or two. So what I've done is stepped up to a size 18 B560, and equally if I need to I can step up to a 16s. Again, I prefer a bigger hook. One has just dislodged the feeder there, got a fish on straight away. Stepping up to a bigger hook just means that obviously there's more hook points showing, more chance of hooking the fish basically when they're feeding quite aggressively. And obviously on natural venues they're not really that tackle shy. So you can see this is the stamp of fish that we've been catching. One of the things obviously with maggot feeder fishing, you're never really going to be able to be too selective with it. Again, when we're doing stuff like this, like we're doing today, we're just running through maggot feeder fishing in its sort of simplest form with a few little tweaks. Because we're not really changing the baits, putting anything else other than maggots through the feeder and a little bit of ground bait, we can't really sort of target the skimmers or perch as such. So we're just pretty much catching whatever comes along. But as I say, we're getting plenty of bites now. The session's going really well. We've just had the one solitary perch so far, about an ounce. But again, there's always a chance of a 2-pounder in somewhere, or like a big reservoir like this. As I say, the session's going really well, and because I'm getting into a good rhythm now of casting nice and regularly, you can see when the tip does spring back, I'm just very gently tightening up to the feeder, and it's usually around a point like this that I am getting a bite and a fish on. I think that's another one there. I might have just missed him actually. So again, because the fish are coming to the feeder that quickly, that's why I've decided to shorten the hook length down. Yeah, it's absolutely bust the maggot, that one. And one thing that I'll also point out as well is the hook length now that I've switched to is actually a fluorocarbon one. Still the same diameter of 0.095, but again, with us catching a lot of fish, I'm not really going for that level of presentation now. I'm more really trying to cut down on tangles, missed bites, things like that. So stiffer hook length material, being fluorocarbon in this case, just allows me to do that. So again, making these little changes. I've also brought the stop down behind the feeder, so I'm effectively now fishing a fixed paternoster rather than a running paternoster as I was earlier. And as I've said, that just goes back again to trying to connect with more fish. It's inevitable when you are fishing for roach that you are going to miss bites, especially when they're feeding quite aggressively, as they seem to be out there now. But just giving yourself a bit of a scope to make a couple of changes to the rig as the session goes on. Keep tweaking things. If you're missing bites, start to look to shorten that hook length down, up your hook sizes, things like that. Again, we did start very much, there's another one on now, very much on the light side today. You can see just how quick the bites are. As soon as that feeder hits bottom, the tip's going round now. And ultimately that's what we're after today. Really good spot on the maggot feeder. Slightly nicer roach that time. One of the bigger ones of the day, that. Again, the average fish today has probably been about an ounce, maybe two, something like that. Nip the hook, as I was saying in the intro, he's nailed right in the bottom lip, and that's what we're looking for. When the feeder hits bottom and the tip goes round, that's where I expect to hook them. But as I was saying, the stamper fish today, not massive, but you can see how you can build a nice little weight just ticking over, catching fish of that sort of size and smaller on a maggot feeder, especially when you're catching nice and quick. One little thing I would prefer to do today is fish a bit closer in if I could, but again, I've had to find that feature with it being a big water like a reservoir. I've had to find that sort of channel, and that's the kind of area that I'm expecting the fish to be held up in anyway. And as I say, due to that sort of choice, I think that's why we've had a nice quick start to the session. But when you're catching fish of this sort of stamp, say if you were fishing on a commercial or somewhere easier, you'd want to be fishing quite close, maybe 15 to 20 metres max really on a feeder like this. Today, as I say, we're fishing about 45 turns, so quite a distance out. But again, that's to try and find a feature. But we wanted to try and do this method today, cover it in a bit more detail on a natural venue. Again, it's equally as effective on commercials, but on natural venues like this, you do have to think about your hook length choices, little details in the rig a bit more than you would do on, say, an easier venue. One little thing as well that I'm doing is I'm giving the feeder maybe 15 or 20 seconds once it's settled before I'm twitching it back and straightening the hook length out. Again, it seems the fish want a really nice active bait today, and I've had a few doing that. Just as I've been pulling the feeder back, they've effectively hooked themselves. Just having to wait a little bit longer for a bite on this cast. And equally, I'm not leaving the feeder in now for more than, say, a minute, minute and a half, something like that, before I'm having a recast. With the holes being nice and big in the feeder, at least it'll empty nice and quick, so I'm not too worried about bringing the feeder out not long after I've cast it. So I say the session's going really well at the moment, and we're putting together a nice little net of fish. There's another pull. Not sure whether this one's dropped off on the strike there. But what we'll do is we'll keep plugging away with this and keep you updated. Obviously, it'd be nice if we start hooking a few skimmers or better fish, but again, it's always 50-50 when it's like that on a venue such as this. If the roach are in your peg, they're there in numbers, it's very hard to sort of root out the bigger fish, such as skimmers and perch, unless you're changing sort of worm or corn hook baits. But as I've said, we'll keep this feeder going in, keep ticking over, and we'll keep you updated if we do start to hook a few better fish. And obviously, if not, we'll keep you updated towards the back end of the session and give you another little update then. Let's get this feeder back out there, see if we can keep catching a few of these nice roach. Right, so we're getting towards the back end of this sort of stint that we're having on the Maggot feeder. As I say, we're going to film another one today, moving on to the waggler, but we're probably going to cut the feeder fishing just a little bit short by an hour or so, purely because it doesn't look like we're going to get into any bigger fish at this rate. Again, it's one of those things on these natural venues, because you're using Maggot feeders, you're pretty much going to catch everything. It's almost limiting you in terms of being able to pick out those bigger fish in your peg. But hopefully what we've run through today, little things, tips and tricks regarding Maggot feeder fishing, as I say, a lot of it to do with the rig, will give you a bit more of an idea of little adaptations that you can make to Maggot feeder rigs in different circumstances, trying to, as I say, negotiate different elements of fishing venues like this, or say if you're on commercials, trying to fish more up in the water for fish, things like that, modifying your feeders, and just making those sort of decisions as like shortening down hook lengths as the day goes on. So just trying to concentrate and see if they get another bite now. So the session's gone really well. Bite to chuck pretty much, but not sure whether I've actually hooked this one. But the problem is at the moment there just seems to be too many fish out there to really effectively fish this rig. I'm in and out pretty much every 30-40 seconds at this rate. And in normal circumstances, if I was trying to catch a lot more fish, then I'd move on to sort of a helicopter style rig, purely because it's more of a self-hooking rig. Again, don't really want to cover that in today's video, purely because it's something that you'll see me use a lot more when I'm using ground bait feeders on this venue. If you look back to when we did our reservoir bream fishing video, I use a helicopter feeder rig there, and it purely sort of cuts down on missed bites really. There's only so much you can do with regards to shortening the hook length on a day like this when there's that many fish feeding. That'll increase your your ratio of bites to actually fish landed quite often, and in circumstances like this then you have to have a rethink with regards to the actual rig that you're using. But it's been a cracking little session. As I say, in 3 hours we've put together a decent little net of fish. Again, not a massive weight, but the key thing is that we've got bites pretty much consistently from the off. As I say, we weren't really after a massive weight today. Again, if I was after a big weight, I'd be using ground bait feeders, really piling in the bait, fishing nice and aggressive. As you can see, missing plenty of bites as well, which isn't ideal. Again, that's purely when the fish are coming that fast to the feeder that they're pretty much smashing into the hook bait and not hooking themselves. Which can be very frustrating on a day like this, but what we'll try and do is get one more fish to sort of end the session on. As I say, hopefully there's plenty of little tips and tricks that we've covered today that you can apply to your maggot feeder fishing, and as I say, lots of little different things you can do. Tweak the rigs and the feed into different venues. But it is getting a bit frustrating with the missed bites now. Again, when you get a big shoal of fish in front of you on a venue like this, they can drive you mad with missed bites. Again, at the start of the session when we were hooking fish pretty much every time we had a bite, it's when they aren't really feeding that aggressively. See there, one's had another pluck at it. As I say, this is when you really need to be on sort of a self-hooking rig. We'll see if we can just get one more fish to end the session on before we have a look at what we've caught. Again, it's not going to be a massive net of fish or anything particularly impressive, but as I say, today's video is really just giving you a demonstration of different things you can do with a maggot feeder and how it applies to a venue such as this. And there we go, that's one on now. So I think if we land this one, we'll call it the last one of the session. Again, not a big fish, another roach, probably a couple of ounces. In fact, that'd be the smallest one of the day. That one just dropped off on the foot plate. Tiny little roach, but we'll call that the last fish of the session and have a quick look at what we've had today. Right, so there you go, our final net of fish. As I say, not particularly impressive, but again, that's what you really get with maggot feeder fishing. Catches everything in your peg. As I say, today the stamper fish hasn't been massive, but the key thing is you can see there's quite a few in there. Plenty of bites in the couple of hours that we've been fishing it, and as I say, hopefully the few things that we've run through today, little tips and tricks that you can make to maggot feeder fishing, you can sort of translate into your fishing on local venues. As I say, what we've used here today will work on commercials, pretty much anywhere you want to fish, so equally canals as well. So as I say, as always from Last Cast, thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you on that next episode.